Hi, Georgia.
Hi there.
First things first, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Yes, nice to be here in the Netherlands, and just really excited for people to hear the new songs.
Yeah, you've been busy. You have a new album ready, which will be coming out in a couple of months. Before we get into the album, I'd like to jump back just a little bit. Now, the past few years have been very, very interesting and crazy for a lot of people in the music business. For you, who's always been somebody who's kind of isolated herself in a room, writing music, creating all that, what was it like experiencing kind of a forced version of that?
I think it was a sort of weird moment in time. But, I just sort of said to myself, what can you do? You just have to kind of keep yourself busy, keep working. So that's what I did. And lucky enough, I have my own studio, which was, a real godsend, because if I didn't, it would have changed things, I think, a lot for me, because lots of studios shut down and stuff like that. Well, just for that period. But yeah, I was able to just kind of lock myself away like usual and make new music. And I actually found it quite sort of, at first, quite liberating, because I had been playing live prior to that for quite a long time to get people aware of Seeking Thrills and of some of my music. So there was a lot of 2 years prior to that of touring a lot. And I was kind of in this already a bit in the state of I want to get back in the studio. And so I'm not saying it was obviously a great time, because it was the world changed. But I have to say I just kind of locked myself away and wrote the new kind of demos for this album. And I think just worked,
What is that like for you? And not necessarily just the past couple of years, but that idea of locking yourself away and just being creative and working on music. How would you describe that? Is it a very, I can imagine it being very hazy, where there's no concept of time and all that. How would you describe it?
I think I think it's hard, isn't it? Because I don't want to burst the bubble of what it's like to create, because it is, 50% of it is really magical and mystical, and you're for me, it's very much about sounds. So in my studio, I have certain keyboards that I'm interested in, because the sound sparks some kind of imagination in me, and then I sort of write hooks or write melodies so that part of it is really, it's amazing, but then you have to turn that into a song, and you have to sort of believe in yourself, go through kind of a whole process of I like to finish what I start. Some people don't really. Some artists, quite quick to move on, and then they'll go back. But I like to, when I start something, I like to finish it. So I always see something through, and if something doesn't work, I'll move on. But something always comes from the idea that you've done, previous. So it's I very much sort of work like that, and I like being alone for the beginning part of that, because it is just my kind of head and thoughts and. So for me, the isolation in that part's really, I like it. And you're sort of coming up with, the kind of, maybe this song should be like this, and I'll just put little droplets of thoughts and ideas down. But it's not always like that, It's a process, like any sort of creative job. There's good times and there's the hard times.
But I do find it interesting, the kind of these two separate stages that you mentioned. So let's focus on the first one first. Especially with this album, is there anything that you do? Do you listen to a lot of certain music? Are you looking for certain textures? Are you looking for certain synth sounds? How does that first kind of exploration go?
Yeah, for this record, I was very much into sort of the 90s point in electronic pop music where dance music had obviously come and taken over the world. You know, it was suddenly becoming the sound of the underground to the mainstream. And I liked the way certain artists were taking elements of dance sounds and using it within pop music. So a big album for me was Ray of Light by Madonna, particularly the producer William Orbit. I suddenly got completely obsessed with listening to William's back catalogue. And then through listening, I sort of, how did he make that sound? Like that sort of very spacey, euphoric kind of string sound and drones, and that very much kind of sparked ideas of like, I want to get this synth, I want to get that, and maybe I can write a song on there, or I particularly like the way William used acoustic guitar in a sort of dance production, and I thought, oh, that's cool. I'm gonna get a guitar. So through listening to certain artists, producers, I sort of gathered, took some inspiration from the sound there, and then I got a synth called the Poly 6, which is a Korg synth. It was 1982, and I particularly liked the sort of organy keyboard sound within it, and I liked the filter on it. So a lot of the compositions for this new record were actually started with chord progressions on the Poly 6, with me kind of filtering up and filtering down to kind of build up tension and then build it down, which is a dance music technique with certain chords. You know, if you're going dun, boom, boom, bam, 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 dum, boom, 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 you know. So I liked that synth because you could do that, and then I just ended up writing quite a lot of the bare sort of bones of some of the songs on that synth. So yeah, I very much like the first process, the first bit is, feeling inspired by certain sounds, and listening, watching films. I watched quite a lot of 90s films, like The Beach. And obviously, I think in that first period, I'm just kind of very open to sort of new, like, ideas. And then I take that and go into the studio and see how I can create that with sound, So it's very fun, that beginning bit. And then not all of it makes it, Most of it is left behind and you're like, God, what was I doing that day, But some of it stays and leads on to the next part of the process.
Yeah, I was going to say that experimentation, I suppose, is necessary to get where you eventually end
That's
up.
the word I was looking for, experimentation. Exactly. It's very much experimenting that first period, yeah.
And then the difficult side starts in a way where you have to hone all that, or kind of hone all that stuff into these 3-4 minute distilled songs. So
that's the key, yeah.
When you're working on that, do you already have kind of certain words or themes in mind, or is it first purely the music and making, as you mentioned, kind of this danceable type track, or do you already have kind of like, I want to evoke this emotion, or I want to do this?
I think it's a bit of all of it, really, of what you've mentioned. I mean, for me, well, I'll talk about this new album because for me, it was different than writing the last record because I knew I was going to be working with Rostam. So that very much kind of influenced how much I wanted to finish, or how much I wanted to kind of put into the demos, because I wanted his involvement. Sure. So, and I was interested in what he would bring to the sound of those compositions. So it was slightly different this time round, but I think, I'm very much aware that I write pop songs. You know quite instantaneously, whether this is going to be like a 3-minute song or whether something else is going to be a bit more of a longer kind of composition. So it's like I very much think about the structure beforehand. So with all those ideas, I'm like, okay, well, I need to consolidate that into the structure, the verse, the chorus, the bridge, the verse, the chorus, so then you think about, I think about the verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus. Some people don't call it those, they'll call it whatever. But I think I need some sort of structure in place to add all the ideas into it. And then I think of it a bit methodically, like I've now got to think about the vocal, so think about the melody. So quite often it will just start with gobbledygook, and then you try and figure out what you're singing out of that. That's just the way I work. Sometimes I will have lyrics before, but quite often it will start with just the melody and then the lyrics for me. But this is what was interesting about this new kind of way that I did this record, was that Rostam very much wanted me to think about the lyrics, Okay. So when I went to LA with some of the demos, a lot of them, the lyrics weren't written because I wanted my experience in LA and the feelings I would get from being in a new environment, working in a new way. I wanted that to affect the lyrics. So that was my kind of job really when I got to LA. It was, actually writing the vocal parts.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very quickly about Rostam, and I've spoken to him before. He's a great producer, I think. But for you, you've been doing everything by yourself basically for the last couple of years. So, so were you ready to relinquish some of that control, or was it also a challenge?
I don't think it was relinquishing the control at all. It was Rostam was very aware of my artistry, and how he had been following my career for quite a long time, and he was somewhat kind of fascinated by how I did things. He wasn't like, that's wrong, you can't do it like that, no, we're scrapping that. He was very much, the first week I got there, I realized how he was embracing also the way I would work. So it was a collaborative experience, actually. It was really like, learning off each other. And I think that was why it kind of sounds like nothing else, really, the music. It's kind of come out sounding very unique. But yeah, there were certain parts of the kind of studio experience that I was with someone else, and you're eating with someone else, you're with someone else for like 2-3 months, sure. And it's that side for me was the different side, and I didn't know how I would get on with Rostam. I could have got there and it all, just was like, he hated me, I hated him. Not hate, but you just don't get on and you go, sure. Right, thanks, we'll move on. But thank the higher power, whatever, that it didn't happen like that. We just instantly got on, and I was just so, I think, in this state of mind of wanting to learn off him, because I was aware of how talented he is and all the work he had done previously. I wanted to know how he did it, and how he wrote some of the songs. And so I came with a total sort of curiosity and an open mind, really. I didn't go into the experience thinking I want it done that way, I want that done like that, I want that. I just went completely unknowingly, let's try it type vibe.
It feels like a very liberating process, even both the writing process and the recording process. You kind of let it go a little bit. It's just the way it sounds to me. But
yeah.
You mentioned kind of meeting Rostam and having to get on with him, and also kind of experiencing LA and being out of your comfort zone, and that kind of influencing the words that you write. So the album is called Euphoria. What was your time in LA like?
Euphoric.
Sorry. Sorry. I left my paper over there. But what was the experience in LA? Why did it ended up being called what it is?
Well, there's a couple of sort of answers to that. The first one was the first time that me and Rostam actually worked with each other. He got in contact with me over Instagram. He had heard a song I'd done with Muramasa called Live Like We're Dancing. And Alex had sent Rostam the demo, and Rostam very kindly got in contact over DM, just direct messaged me and was like, yo, I really love your voice. I've heard the demo of Live Like We're Dancing and just wanted to say how much I love it. And I was like, wow, it's such a lovely message to get. And I was a big fan of his and like, wow. And then, so we had already kind of got in contact with each other or made some kind of communication. And then I was in LA in 2019, before the pandemic, playing some shows out there. And I had some time to spare, and I just messaged Rostam being like, I'm here. Can we please get together and try and do something in the studio? And he was like, sure, yeah, come over. And that was a new experience for me, was being in these sessions, doing sessions. I'm not really, prior to that, I hadn't really done the whole session thing. My label are very much just leave me to get on with things. I'm not, I haven't done the rounds in LA or whatever. So I turn up, and on that first day we wrote It's Euphoric. And the word euphoric just sort of came to both me and Rostam as we were writing that song. And it was such a sort of incredible moment, because we were like, oh my God, we've written a song in like literally half a day. And I was like, I was like, that hardly ever happens. When I can, sometimes you can write a song in an hour, sometimes it takes a month, and it was just, I don't know, it was some kind of magical moment, really. And so we already planted the seed for the album being called Euphoric then. So then the pandemic hit, and then I found myself back in LA in 2020 with Rostam. 2021, sorry, not 2020. And yeah, it was, I think for me, growing up in London, I was always drawn to American music. London was this city a bit like New York. We had always had the American import music. I mean, American music was a kind of bigger than actually British music, So I've always had a fascination with America. I've always wanted to go just because of the music. And so as I arrived into LA, I already had that like, oh my gosh, I'm here, like this is where, the Byrds, right? This is where bloody Jim Morrison got lost in the Laurel Canyon, and this is where, hip hop, this is the birth of like, of Hollywood. And I did have that. I had that feeling, and I think for me that was totally euphoric. And London, as much as I'm a London girl and it's my home, I think I I'd just been there for too long, you know, creating, writing in the same space. I just wanted something completely different. And it was lucky that Rostam lives in LA. I think I would have gone, if Rostam lived in Mexico, I would have gone to Mexico, you know. So I was going where he essentially to him. So the whole experience was a risk, and it was different, and it was, but it was liberating, you know. And I think that euphoric feeling is liberation for me. So it felt very fitting when we came to the title of the record. We were just like, it's got to be called Euphoric. Sense. Yeah, it made sense.
This kind of ties into something I read in the bio. Now, I never know whether you approve any of those.
Oh yeah, I know.
Okay,
yeah.
So there's a line that said, "This record is a surrender to my issues, my past, my flaws, the healing process." So being kind of outside of your comfort zone, what was it? Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Yeah. How was it healing to make this record?
Well, I think it was, you know, coming out of the pandemic. It was coming out of that weird time. It was a very strange time for everyone, and I think it was also a time where we had lots time. There's a lot of time to reflect on our lives and like what we're going through, and I think I just going to LA and having this experience was also like a bit of a reassessment of what I wanted to get out of life, and sort of face a few truths, and like, you know, go there and be quite vulnerable. And I wanted to create quite an emotive record. I like emotional music. I like hearing singers that are vulnerable and they have a like slight quiver in their throats and they're going there, you know. So I very much sort of went there with an aim to sort of face a few of my issues through the music, you know, because I think prior, Seeking Thrills was like I was so influenced by the kind of 80s house scene. I was just trying to recreate the kind of elements of that and put it in pop music. It was not really so much to do with songwriting or la da da da. It was just like pure vibes, I think. So this was different. I wanted to go and sit behind a piano, write chords, and have an emotional feeling and see what came out. And I think surrendering to the experience, to vulnerability, was necessary to kind of go there. To write the music that I wanted to write, you know.
Yeah, what I find interesting, then one of my favorites on the record is "So What," and
that's the one. That's a very emotional song, yeah.
And then what I like about it is it is that vulnerability, but it's also resilience in the sense that I'm always going to give it one more try. So can you talk a little bit about that song, how that came to be, and what the mental process was?
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, that song I wrote with a very talented, incredible songwriter called Justin Parker, who wrote Lana Del Rey's Video Games. Okay. So Justin and I got together. We'd kind of touching base, we'd wanted to do a couple of sessions, both fans of each other. And that was another sort of get in the studio, very small kind of studio at his. And I think we were both in quite an emotional state. It was, I think everyone just was in quite an odd place during the pandemic, you know, and people were reevaluating certain things, you know, to do with their lives, and also dealing with something that was extraordinary and kind of unbelievable. So It was actually quite an interesting time to write music, I think, or be an artist, because often out of those kind of struggles and the reflection of society, comes, from previous histories, it could, you get great art. Yeah. So we met up and we were both kind of feeling like, wow, what's going on? What's going on? And we were playing around with the chords. And then I just sort of went, so what? And he was like, oh, I love that. I love so what? And it's the idea that you're trying, I guess. We're all trying our hardest to live life, do the things make us happy or whatever happiness is. But you get knocked down, but then you get back up again, and it's like this sort of cycle of life. So I think we were both feeling a bit like knocked down, but we'll get back up again and we'll give it one more go. And we didn't want to write a sort of really depressing song. We wanted to write something that was optimistic. When people heard it, even though it is very sort of, minor chords, the melody and the message behind it is optimism.
Sure.
And I think it also reflects my sort of idea of life, I think, that you always give it one more try, I was always taught as a kid, it doesn't matter, G, keep going, you always give it one more go. And it's that kind of survivalist mentality, I think, which it's quite London, I guess, actually, maybe. I don't know.
I think it's a very wise lesson to learn to not give up.
Yeah, I think that's it, is to not give up, yeah. Yeah.
And especially in an industry where you kind of have to chase your dreams and then be confident, because
totally.
Otherwise it's not going to work. I
exactly. Think. Or just seeing, reading lyrics from other artists that are kind of vulnerable and optimistic. It influences the younger generations to everyone goes through stuff and everyone goes so it's like just keep going.
Georgia, may I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.